When we talk about inclusivity for differently able people, for example, right? I strongly believe that it's the organization leadership sets the tone. It has to begin at the top, and it becomes part of the culture. Now, do you see, in your opinion, that this is becoming mainstream, and there is a space being created for looking at such initiatives to be becoming mainstream by leadership, or you still believe things are not there yet?
I think there's a lot of leadership support for general inclusion and equity initiatives. With that said, if we look at different key categories, if we're looking at race and ethnicity, about 75% of employers have programs with that focus. Talk about gender in the workplace, about 90% of employers have a focus in that area. When it comes to people with disabilities, only about 5% of employers out there have programs focused on disability inclusion and accessibility. And I was like, why is that? Well, when I really looked into it, it seems that it's not that employers don't feel something or care, right? They just take that money and they sort of put it on the charity side. A lot of people like to say AI is not biased. Well, I mean, in a general sense, maybe not, but when individuals with unintentional bias develop algorithms, it's going to take a while to train those algorithms and add additional information to ensure that AI is operating with that. So when it comes to disability inclusion and accessibility, a passion of mine, I'm really inspired by and motivated by family members with disabilities. So I grew up with a father who was blind my whole life, helping him navigate a very inaccessible world at that time.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hyreo Rise series of podcast. Today, we're dealing with a very, very interesting topic. We're going to talk a lot about inclusion and how are we rewriting the talent acquisition rule set based on inclusion and diversity. I've got a very, very interesting guest with us, Ron Fish. Ron Fish is the head and senior director of talent acquisition at Ivanti. He comes with over 2 decades of experience in talent acquisition. He's been a champion of inclusivity. Thank you so much, Ron, for being part of the show today.
Thanks, Arun. I'm excited to be here.
Would love to have you give a little introduction about yourself for the audience, Ron, please.
Sure, absolutely. I hail from the talent acquisition ecosystem. I've been here for quite a long time. I've worked for a couple of large organizations like Oracle and Cognizant. I'm pretty well known. Since that time, I've worked for a couple of smaller brands where I've looked to do something a little bit more meaningful, more end-to-end, everything from employer brand and increasing company curb appeal to driving hiring production in line with corporate goals and corporate growth goals. So most recently, I've been with Ivanti, a security software organization heading up talent acquisition programs for Ivanti.
Lovely to have you, Ron. Again, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I want to start off with this question. You've been a talent person for a long, long time, but I know you've been a person who has run many, many inclusivity initiatives across multiple organizations and with multiple groups. What motivates you? Tell us that story, Ron.
Sure. You make me sound old, Arun, so hopefully the gray hair didn't already give it away. But yes, I've been in the space for a long time. When it comes to disability inclusion and accessibility, a passion of mine, I'm really inspired by and motivated by family members with disabilities. So I grew up with a father who was blind my whole life, helping him navigate a very inaccessible world at that time. And then I've got several immediate family members that are neurodivergent with ADHD, dyslexia, and related. So helping them in different capacities navigate inaccessibility, helping them build accessibility in my own personal life has really motivated me. And in the last several years, I would say that professional life and personal life has sort of crossed over, where I've recognized how uniquely I'm positioned as a global talent acquisition leader to be able to make an impact from where I sit more broadly than just as one individual.
Lovely. And I think that's a lesson for many others. Pick it up from where you learn things and kind of take it forward for the larger audience. I want to start there, Ron. I want to ask you this first question. You've been part of such initiatives. You know it at close quadrants what it means. What are the barriers people face? Let's be very simple about that. And what are those barriers that people with disability face, especially in recruiting? And how do you bring in that equity really in the recruiting process, starting from the application stage till the end? What have you seen and what have you experienced in that?
Yeah, and to be real clear, I think there's a lot of controversy, especially in the US market, around DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I want to be real clear that we're talking about equity. We're not talking about advantage. We're not trying to accelerate anybody's candidacy because they fit a certain category. We're really looking at ensuring we're creating equity. So I've become really passionate about ensuring that recruiting, talent acquisition, and hiring programs are accessible for people with disabilities. But at the end of the day, when you build in accessibility, when you focus on universal design of your processes and programs, especially if you start that from the beginning, which is an advantage, you're really creating a better atmosphere, a better process for everybody. So while it helps create that equity, it also creates a better process, more empathy, more thoughtfulness as part of the process. So it can be a big advantage. But some of the barriers that are faced, I can give you a real recent example that involved AI. So there's a gentleman named Paul that's part of the deaf and hard of hearing community that's looking for a job. He was recently in a discussion with an AI bot relating to scheduling an interview. So great news, right? They wanted to interview him. Well, they were trying to schedule a phone interview. So you can imagine for somebody that's deaf, a phone call is not going to be really beneficial. So he was beginning to ask AI, can I have an accommodation? I'd prefer a video interview because then I can use captioning. He can see the hiring manager talking and things of that nature. Well, AI then just responded and said, we make our best effort to ensure our career site is accessible, and went into some sort of company line, right? So it wasn't helpful. Then when Paul said, I can't do the phone interview, I'd like to do a video interview, AI said, okay, I'll cancel the interview. And then Paul was like, no, I don't want to cancel the interview. I want to interview with the company. I just need this accommodation, but was unable to do that through AI. So at that point, at a minimum, AI should have offered a path for accommodations, a phone number to reach a human, an email to reach a human. But those are the kind of barriers that people face. And I think any of us with empathy built in to our morals, we can see that there's a lack of equity there. And that's with AI. But it happens with humans just the same.
Right. And rather unfortunate for sure in terms of how this happened. And I do agree it happens with humans as well. But when we talk about inclusivity for differently abled people, for example, right? I strongly believe that it's the organizational leadership sets the tone. It has to begin at the top, and it becomes part of the culture. Now, do you see, in your opinion, that this is becoming mainstream and there is a space being created for looking at such initiatives to be becoming mainstream by leadership, or you still believe things are not there yet?
I think there's a lot of leadership support for general inclusion and equity initiatives. With that said, if we look at different key categories, if we're looking at race and ethnicity, about 75% of employers have programs with that focus. Talk about gender in the workplace, about 90% of employers have a focus in that area. When it comes to people with disabilities, only about 5% of employers out there have programs focused on disability inclusion and accessibility. And I was like, why is that? Well, when I really looked into it, it seems that it's not that employers don't feel something or care, right? They just take that money and they sort of put it on the charity side, and they overlook how they can build real programs to create that equity internally. And if we consider that 75% of the global workers with disabilities don't disclose that to their employer, the community of people with disabilities at your organization that you know about, there's probably 4 times that number overall that actually have disabilities. So really raising awareness, working with executive leaders, and having a champion. So I would consider that I was a champion, kind of a pest that was constantly bringing this up. But as you raise awareness, it's amazing the impact that can be made by simply raising awareness and kind of unlocking something in people's brains where they begin to look at things through a little different lens and kind of get that stigma pushed aside where they limit bias and begin to look at things through that lens of impartiality and with more empathy.
I mean, let me ask you another question on that. Have you seen examples of companies who are walking the talk? You've been a champion. You've been in this space and you've researched on this space as well. Companies which are focused on that, companies who are advertising that, and companies who have really looked at talent with disabilities to be part of their workforce. Any examples that you would want to share, or would be great for the audience to kind of relate that to?
So I've mentioned that there's only a small degree of companies that are really doing a lot here. And I was fortunate to meet somebody named Jocelyn recently. Jocelyn runs an ERG, an employee resource group called Ability Connect. She does that for a company called Albemarle Corporation that happens to be located in Charlotte. I'm excited to be presenting on their upcoming mental health awareness event. We'll be talking about this topic about mental health in the workplace and related, but Jocelyn and this ERG, along with the company itself, has done some incredible work. And what I always say is, if I can see it from the outside, there must be great things going on the inside, because as a longtime, talent acquisition leader, it's really hard to project company culture externally and give a really good view. So when I look at Albemarle Corporation and see all the great work they've done, all the partnerships they've had, and then I've heard Jocelyn's story as well, it's been really incredible to see what they've done. So big shout out for Albemarle Corporation, walking the talk. And, clearly I've done some of that work at Ivanti, but I want to shout out Albemarle Corporation.
Lovely. Audience, do take a note of that and know that there are organizations, though not as much as we would love to, but we do have organizations that are making a difference in that space. Now, coming back to the complexity that we have in businesses today, I think everybody is talking about AI, and you a few minutes ago spoke about something that didn't go well in an AI implementation, and we had some of those challenges that we spoke about. But if you generally look for systems in the future where you are going to have AI human harmony in some form or shape, because that's where the world is moving today, and if you're looking at it from the context of disability and how do we get that empathy built into systems, how do we build that coexistence of that in systems, do you think we can design systems that will kind of allow both these worlds to kind of coexist together?
I definitely think so. So a lot of people like to say AI is not biased. Well, I mean, in a general sense, maybe not. But when individuals with unintentional bias develop algorithms, it's going to take a while to train those algorithms and add additional information to ensure that AI is operating with that. So I mentioned also in that example a couple of small adjustments that company could make where there's maybe a better response, or just simply that path of accommodations for that individual to reach out to. I absolutely think so, because I'm a big believer that AI is going to be great at managing those high volume, low value tasks. In fact, when they first invent a robot that's AI that can clean homes or make my bed, things like that, I'm definitely going to raise my hand to be the first one. And I think that's in the workplace sort of what we're looking for as well, right? How can we free up bandwidth for recruiters and HR professionals today? Companies are not investing money in people right now. We have small but mighty teams at most companies. So how can we do more with less? We can do more with less with AI, but AI is probably not going to negotiate an executive level offer package for me. But can they screen resumes, screen 300 applicants and shortlist, the best applicants that are in the pool based on the job description? Absolutely. So I think that's really what we need to be targeting. And then there can be that harmony where humans can handle those high value tasks, and then AI can manage those lower value tasks that are very high in volume. And then we would get some harmony there where we can really make an impact and then save costs and all the other things that companies need to do. And then those small but mighty teams become even mightier.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I think that's the direction that I think most of AI in recruiting and recruiting tech is going to be. And as somebody who's working in AI for recruiting tech, that's something very close to my heart. But one of those challenges that large organizations, mid to large organizations, definitely face is even with AI and even with when you're hiring talent without disability. Also, one core factor is candidate experience.
Yep.
When you're talking about at scale, 300 applicants for a job, it's not going to be possible for recruiters to be able to have one-on-one conversation, forget even one-on-one communication in the form of emails, right? One of those areas where AI definitely is doing or attempting to do a lot is to bring that some sort of a connect possible and bring that experience at scale, right? What are your thoughts on that? How do you view that, and how do you see that evolving in the years to come?
Yeah, and as a talent leader, I'm really focused on candidate experience, and maybe more so than others that I've talked to, but anybody that's worked for me has heard me say fiercely defend the candidate experience. Well, in today's day and age, small teams, huge numbers of applicants, how do we do that? Well, I think AI can help. And can AI actually, also sort of enhance that human factor? I think so. If you're creative, if you think about this from the perspective of AI doesn't have to just be, Marlon or Susan or whatever the AI name is, right? It doesn't have to be that bot. It can be that individual talking on behalf of a real recruiter. So I think we can integrate a little bit of that human factor where while it's an AI communicating with me, it's at the bidding or on behalf of that recruiter or the hiring manager. And I think that can integrate a little bit of that human factor. And then if we boil it all down, you and I have, I'm sure, seen all of the posts about candidates getting ghosted. We could debate whether they were really ghosted or not, but at the end of things, they didn't hear back as effectively as they would have liked to. If they hear back from AI, it's probably better than not hearing back at all, right? Just like an automated response from an ATS is better than not hearing at all. So I absolutely think that AI can help increase communication, especially with the overworked teams, and can really help connect those dots between the human factor and the machine or the AI, and really take us to a new level and help preserve or even optimize the candidate experience.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm going to say that communication is bias free. All the 300 applicants are definitely, AI is ensuring that there is a communication going back to them, whichever be the case. And I think the opportunity really lies in having more structured, more frequent personalization that is possible, because, you can't interview 300 people. So as and when interviews are getting done, what happens is, AI can message the others who are not getting shortlisted far more efficiently than humans getting involved there, which actually leads to a better brand building on the ground, because the same talent could be, your future talent or future employee in that sense. But because we spoke about bias, truly bias-free hiring model be very, very difficult to find. But AI doing that in a fully unbiased way also is questionable because of the way inherently software could be built. But do you think if you balance it with AI and humans, and then you have a mechanism where you're trying to create transparency around that, do you think there's a way forward in ensuring that the core values of the organization, the core values of what we want to bring to the table, that gets protected in some form or shape?
Yeah, I definitely think so. So I've been a part of programs where we've trained hiring managers on reducing bias, limiting bias, increasing empathy, creating a great interview experience, moving away from the old days at IBM when there'd be 15 people on one side of the table, one on the other, sweating, getting interrogated, right? Let's move away from that. I think with AI, we mentioned there could be some innate bias that's just sort of built into the algorithm. But if individuals are building this and considering that and beginning to tweak it, here's the unique thing about AI. You just have to train it one time and it's at scale, right? In most cases, it's at volume. So if you train it one time, you get it right that time. The other thing is I have yet to hear about an AI bot that has resigned from an organization. So, you have that knowledge capital now ongoing. So unless there's an apocalypse and we lose all power and energy in the world, you're going to have AI for life. And, the tenure of your AI bots is going to be extensive. So you'll have that knowledge capital. So all you can do is keep chipping away to get better. You're not going to be immediately or maybe ever bias free, but to get closer to that ideal state is always what you want to do. Continuous improvement, keep working at it. When you have case studies or examples of failures, use that, integrate that into the algorithm and ensure that you're adding for those variables. But there are always going to be new variables. Every person that is blind or low vision doesn't need the exact same accommodation. Everybody that's neurodivergent doesn't need the same exact accommodation. So there's always unique situations, and most people with disabilities do have patience because they've faced these barriers. They know how to overcome them. So if we work together, partner together, we can do it. And AI could certainly play a big role.
Right, absolutely. Very well said, Ron. In fact, I'm going to take this back to my team and tell them about the story that I heard here in terms of how AI could actually be counterproductive, but what's the possibility that AI brings to the table in terms of creating that equitable, hiring model that we are talking about. As always, Ron, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm sure I can go on for another hour, but in the interest of time, I just want to ask you this one final question for today. In terms of future of AI-driven hiring, and if you want to balance accessibility and inclusion in that context, right? What advice do you want to give to companies and talent leaders in companies where, obviously we want to increase, the accessibility angle that you were talking about, but how do you make more, I would say, future-proof our, hiring for the future so that, of course, we are striking a balance, but we also don't want to let go of our core values around, having inclusivity in terms of, the talent that we were talking about.
Yeah, and the first thing I'll say is that I've never seen anything accelerate inclusion like accessible design. So if you start from that universal design perspective, I've mentioned it, I'll keep harping on that. You create a better environment for everybody. If we take something really basic like creating wide walkways at work, creating bigger cubicles instead of these little jail cells, you're creating a better environment, right? But now somebody with a wheelchair or with a cane can more easily navigate. And then in effect, you're creating a better environment for everybody. So start from the beginning, consider accessibility, ensure that you are building an equitable process that accounts for these variables. Again, you're not going to do it overnight, but raising awareness is very important. It comes down to, it doesn't cost a lot of money. In fact, in most cases, the work that I did led to 2 award wins for my company. It really didn't cost us any money. The company did invest some money along the way, but at the end of the day, just to create an accessible hiring process, talent acquisition process, coach hiring managers, train recruiters, those kinds of things just are some time investment. It doesn't cost a lot of money. So you can definitely create a more inclusive hiring process, more inclusive work environment without a big cost investment.
Right. I can't agree more with you, Ron, on that. It's not really about the dollar that we're spending there. It's essentially in the long term, I think there's a lot more value coming out of it than anything else. So thank you so much, Ron, for joining today. And I loved every bit of our conversation today. Very, very relevant topic, something very close to my heart as well in terms of having some of these initiatives run and picked up by more organizations than before. Lovely connecting with you again on this podcast today. From everybody in our audience, thank you so much, Ron.
Yeah, thanks, Arun. I appreciate it. Great to meet you and great to have the conversation. I love to talk about AI and accessibility.